Parents' Best Curriculum Part 3, how to implement those academic subjects throughout early childhood. I'm going to start off with reading. Many parents are worried about their child learning to read on time. Interestingly, though, studies show that good reading results not from early reading, but from good language development early in life. According to the Early Childhood Research Quarterly, number 28, the foundation of early reading, and in particular reading comprehension, is language. So how's the best way to encourage good language development? That's by talking together. Talk together, talk together, talk together. Converse throughout the day. Speak to him in a normal way as you would to an adult. Talk about your plans for the day. Tell him stories. Let him tell you stories. Sing songs together. Ask him questions. Let him ask you questions. Listen to what he has to tell you and communicate with him in just as in a way you would communicate with another adult, as you're helping develop that adult communication ability. And be sure not to interrupt or continually correct him as he's talking either. Allow language development to occur naturally through interaction with you, the parent. Children have an insatiable desire to learn and to figure out the world around them. So channel it. Have plenty of good books around you and read to him occasionally. He'll probably begin to ask about certain letters or sounds. Well, then tell him what they are. Tell him what they mean, how they sound, and just leave it at that. He'll probably want to spell his name or words that are familiar to him. Explain to him how to do that and leave it at that. Teach as much as possible, like spelling games and such, in an oral manner, because you don't want to stress the eyes at an early age. Use books and reading as a source of gaining needed information about something. Perhaps your child asks you a question that you don't have an answer to. Then together get the book that has that information and together find the answer. True joy and appreciation from reading comes from seeing it as a tool, as a source of needed information, of useful information. It doesn't come from reading silly stories as much as it does from seeing it as truly beneficial to oneself. And remember, a hard copy is much better than Google. The screen can strain the eyes, and what's more, studies have found that information is retained better when it's read in a hard copy than when it's read on the screen, for adults and children. Learning to read fluently really does not take several years if it's done in the right way. As I mentioned in an earlier session, researchers believe that it only takes about 30 contact hours, if the brain is ready, to learn reading to a college proficient level. We literally, though, are creating reading problems by forcing it at an early age. It really doesn't have to be the struggle that it is made to be with these endless flashcards and drills and word lists and vocabulary tests. Chances are, if you're living a normal, useful life with lots of conversation, access to valuable reading material, your child will likely learn to read on his own without being formally taught. I myself did so, and I've met countless other children who have done the same. In fact, it'll probably happen so fast that one day he'll just be reading and you'll be like, hey, he's reading. How'd that happen? But remember that until age 9, the eyes aren't completely ready. So keep reading to a minimum, even if he does learn at an early age. Some educational psychologists recommend no more than 15 minutes at a time to reduce eye strain. Remember that it's much better to do than to read. Reading can come at any time. Learning cause to effect and spirituality and those things we talked about in relation to critical periods cannot come at any time. Reading can come at any time. It might come at 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 or 12 with no noticeable differences later on. In fact, though, studies show that children who learn to read later not only catch up to the early starters, but often pass them in terms of fluency and comprehension. A study recently published by the Early Childhood Research Quarterly compared the differences between children with reading instructional ages of 5 and 7. Here's a quote from this study. The earlier RIA, now RIA stands for Reading Instructional Age, the earlier RIA group had initially superior letter naming, non-word, word, and passage reading. But this difference in reading skill disappeared by age 11. The later RIA had generally greater reading comprehension. Take a look at this chart. We see here that at age 6, some of the kids who didn't get a reading instruction age until age 7 actually knew how to read. But jump ahead till age 9. The later instructional age actually caught up with the earlier instructional age. And the next year, they were ahead. This difference continued to widen throughout the later years. In this graph, we see that the earlier readers initially took a quick jump upward, but then it sort of began to gradually slope and sort of plateau, while the later readers just continued this steady climb, and it just kept going. So that by a later age, there was a difference with the later readers actually having better reading fluency than the earlier reading age instruction group. And notice, though, that the ages, I should mention also that this gap continued to widen throughout the later years. I don't have a graph to illustrate that, but in this study, that gap did continue to widen. The later reading instruction age group actually continued to get better than the earlier age. Notice, though, that the ages were 5 and 7, both before the brain and the eyes are completely ready for reading. The researchers probably would have noticed even bigger differences if they had compared, say, 5-year-olds with 9-year-old reading instruction age. Still, the differences disappeared by age 11, and what's more, the later learners passed the earlier ones. The study also investigated Montessori schools, often acclaimed for their success in teaching early reading, like age 3 sometimes. Here's what they found. The Montessori children had an advantage in reading over the public school children at age 5. Okay, that's good, but not at age 12. Their final word, our findings suggest that success at reading is not assured by an earlier beginning. So why stress the eyes? Why cause brain disorganization and possible damage to future reading activity, reading abilities? Talk with your child, read to him occasionally, allow plenty of time for movement, and your child will, in all likelihood, learn to read naturally with better fluency and expression. How about history? Here's another great academic subject. If there's no TV in the home, children will naturally have an intense curiosity about less entertaining subjects like history. Learn about history through Bible stories. That's an excellent place to start. Children love to hear about things that happened a long time ago. They love to hear stories. So tell them stories. Tell them about the history of our country, things that happened a long time ago, about historical figures and people that have made an impact and been a power for good in the world. Be sure to keep the stories true and wholesome and age appropriate, of course, but don't just read from a book. Tell them from your own knowledge so that you can talk together about it. History can offer a lot of worthwhile lessons to the child if you look for them. Studying history is a wonderful opportunity to show your child the guiding hand of God throughout the process of history. In the book Education, we read that we need to study the working out of God's purpose in the history of nations and in the revelation of things to come, that we may estimate at their true value things seen and things unseen, that we may learn what is the true aim of life, that viewing the things of time in the light of eternity, we may put them to their truest and noblest use. Thus, learning here the principles of his kingdom and becoming its subjects and citizens, we may be prepared at his coming to enter with him into its possession. Anatomy and physiology. Here's another great subject. All children should learn the principles of anatomy and physiology at a very young age. Understanding how the body works can go a long way to the developing of good health habits later in life. It's sort of like if you have a mechanical interest, you would understand that To maintain a car well, it helps to know how it works, what goes on behind the scenes. Same with the body. We'll want to maintain our bodies better if we know how they work. So start with the children. Tell them how the body works and how it happens. Start with the basic body parts, moving on to bones and muscles and systems. You know, there's nothing more real than a tangible part of one's own body. A child can really relate to that. Maybe get a good book with some good diagrams and artistic representations of muscular systems, etc. Teach them the basic health and hygiene principles. The study can continue to expand and deepen as the child grows older. Children should be early taught, as we read in child guidance, in simple, easy lessons, the rudiments of physiology and hygiene. The work should be begun by the mother in the home and should be faithfully carried forward in the school. As the pupils advance in years, instruction in this line should be continued until they are qualified to care for the house they live in. That's talking about the bodily house that they live in. They should understand the importance of guarding against disease by preserving the vigor of every organ, and should also be taught how to deal with common diseases and accidents. Music. An excellent academic subject for any age. Music is very important to the child and throughout life. Begin in the mother's arms with singing to your infant. As your child grows, spend lots of time singing together throughout the day. Teach him good songs. Use real hymns. Children, even at a young age, can very easily learn hymns and learn all the verses. I've met 3-year-olds that had entire hymns memorized, several of them, and all the verses, because they'd just been singing them in their everyday life with their parents. There's no need for the kindergarten songs. Just start off with the real thing. A child should be exposed to good music throughout his entire life. Scientists actually believe that infants are born with what's known as perfect pitch, and that this ability sort of disappears if they're not exposed to a good amount of good music to stimulate that area of the brain. That ability just sort of goes away. I actually have a cellist friend who has perfect pitch, and he said that he grew up just hearing his mother and his older brothers playing stringed instruments all the time, and he maintained that perfect pitch. I've met several other young people with the same abilities, and they said they just grew up in that home that was full of good music, and they loved it throughout their later life. They really loved music. There's a story a professor of mine told me of a young man that was a cellist, and he was learning this particular piece that he found to be pretty difficult. It was a tough piece, but there was this one section that just fit right under his fingers. He could understand it really well, and he just hardly had to practice it. And he mentioned it to his mom and said, "This is funny, this is a really tough piece, but this particular section I'm finding very easy." And the mom said, "That's really interesting." His mother was also a cellist, and she said, "When I was pregnant with you, I was practicing that piece, and I practiced that particular section that you're finding so easy. I practiced that over and over and over. You literally learned that when you were in my womb." Isn't that amazing? Give good music at a young age. Studies have shown that children who are involved in music actually develop better communication and reading ability. Children who are musically trained show stronger neural activation to pitch changes in speech and have a better vocabulary and reading ability than children who do not receive music training. But it's best to wait to begin formal music lessons until about age 8 to 10. Why not? Well, formal music instruction places higher demands on the mind than does formal schooling even. Playing music is one of the most whole brain activities imaginable. Studies have found that it literally just takes the whole brain. It's impossible to even pick out one area that just controls music. It takes the whole thing. And actually, piano performance has been called the pinnacle of human central nervous system performance. And since not all areas of the brain have begun development until age 8 or 10, it's best to wait a bit to get started on formal lessons. And just like formal academics, the late starting music lessons, the children who started music lessons later will soon quickly catch up and do better in the long run. Children who are started later rarely need to be told to practice because they have that maturity to appreciate it more, with less discomfort to tiny fingers and eyes. That's not to exclude your child from musical activity, though. I just want to make that clear. I'm talking about formal lessons should not be begun until about age 10 or 12. But have a piano in the house at an early age for him to play on and experiment on. Encourage him to figure out those songs that you've been singing together. This can help develop the connection between doing something and hearing it, which is very important for reading skills. Indeed, this has been shown from science that being involved with music actually helps improve reading abilities. They might enjoy clapping or marching to music or making little instruments with rubber bands. I used to do that when I was a kid. Perhaps a trip to the local symphony orchestra would be beneficial for them to hear some good music and see music in action. But be sure to avoid music that's overly loud or has a heavy beat to it, as it can damage the hearing, sensitive hearing of a young child, and can actually disrupt the nervous system. Spiritual training. We often don't think of this as an academic subject, but it absolutely should be. Spiritual training is of utmost importance to the young child. It's never too early to tell your child about God or to show him the works of God in nature. As he grows, teach him from the scriptures. We read in Deuteronomy 6:7, "Thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. Thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest on thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." Start with scripture memorization at an early age, but be sure to avoid rote memory. Make memorization applicable. Help them to make application of what they're learning and really understand it and internalize it, and not just rote memory. Spiritual training needs to be real, it needs to be simple, and it needs to be practical and applicable to the life. Children need to understand it in a simple way. And your children need to see real, practical Christianity in you, the parent. As a preparation for teaching his precepts, God commands that they be hidden in the hearts of the parents. "These words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart," he says, "and thou shalt teach them diligently." In order to interest our children in the Bible, we ourselves must be interested in it. To awaken in them a love for its study, we must love it. Our instruction to them will have only the weight of influence given it by our own example and spirit. Spend time in family worship every day. In arousing and strengthening a love for Bible study, much depends on the use of the hour of worship. The hours of morning and evening worship should be the sweetest and most helpful of the day. Let it be understood that into these hours no troubled, unkind thoughts are to intrude, that parents and children assemble to meet with Jesus and invite into the home the presence of holy angels. Let the services be brief and full of life, adapted to the occasion and varied from time to time. Involve your children in family worship at an early age to help them to really understand it, to make Christianity a real daily part of their lives. It needs to be normal, so to speak. To make such a service what it should be, thought should be given to preparation. And parents should take time daily for Bible study with their children. No doubt, it will require effort and planning and some sacrifice to accomplish this, but the effort will be richly repaid. Communication. This is another essential academic subject that is often lacking. However great a man's knowledge, it is of no avail unless he is able to communicate it with others, to others. Part of the curriculum of any home or school should be training in the ability to communicate through speaking and writing. Now, obviously, when they're little children, they shouldn't be spending time writing. But develop that good language in them at an early age, and it will flow out in the natural ability to communicate well. Talk with your children. Again, a foundation of good writing and speaking is laid in that early language development. Of course, this is best developed by communication with adults. in an age-integrated environment, not just in communication with their age mates, their same age peers. The extent of a Christian's usefulness is measured by his power to communicate that which he has received and which has become experience to him. The extent of our usefulness is literally measured by our ability to communicate what we have received. Education falls short if students do not obtain a knowledge of how to use the faculty of speech and how to use to the best advantage the education they have obtained. The youth are to commence when young to learn the proper manner of speech. In addition to the ones we've just looked at in detail, there are plenty more activities and teaching opportunities throughout the daily life. Again, a child might not be doing bookwork, but he can absolutely be learning. There are lots of practical ways to learn academic subjects. Here's just a few, a quick list. Give sufficient opportunities for learning math in everyday activities through counting, dividing, measuring. Math can be learned in everyday life so very easily, and it applies to the mind. It cements the learning in the mind better when it's actually done. Say, building a doghouse, building a bench together. This can provide lots of opportunities for practicing math. How about geography? Learn that on the road trips or vacations. Rather than simply just putting your address into the GPS, give your child the map. Rather, first go over the map with him. Look at the route, look where you're going to go and plot your route. And then you could even have him, when I was little, I would sit in the back seat with the map and I would look at where we were going and I would tell my mom, okay, turn right on such and such road, and I would tell her where to go. And I had great fun doing it, and I learned a lot in the process. You could talk about different countries, different states, what they're like. Just engage in conversation. Maybe meet some people from other areas and talk with them about what it's like. Help your child to learn to think about other regions. You know, maybe it's not all about what they're involved in. Children might enjoy learning about astronomy through watching the stars or the planets in the night sky. Teach your children to tell time. We made a paper plate clock when I was little, and that taught me how to read an analog clock as opposed to a digital one. You can learn the days of the week, how the calendar works, tell your child what day it is in the morning. Children can learn their first and last names, of course, their parents' names, phone numbers, addresses, anything else in a verbal way. They can put that information in their memory, which can be helpful in case of an emergency. Studying the weather can be fascinating for children. Observe the seasons, the clouds, the wind, the precipitation. Have a thermometer to help children keep track of the temperature. And as the saying goes, you can always talk about the weather. This is very true for children. Studying the weather patterns can provide a lot of discussion opportunities for family members, young and old. At age 4, 5, 6, whatever you feel is the right maturity level, continue to add skills. Woodworking, mechanic work, construction, farming, anything that the creativity of the well-rounded child can come up with. You would be amazed. Be sure to allow room for your child to pursue particular interests they have, especially as they mature. But the education should not be solely at the whim of the child. I want to make that clear. The popular idea today that a child should just dictate their own education and just determine what they learn really is unfounded by science. And it can tend toward wrong habits and a lack of perseverance, which can be detrimental to spirituality. Allow for the interest, but strengthen the weaker characteristics also. Help give your child a well-rounded education. Even after the child begins formal academic study, maintain that well-rounded educational atmosphere with plenty of outdoor learning and practical training. The physical, mental, and spiritual capabilities should be developed in order to form a properly balanced character. The faculties of the mind need cultivation that they may be exercised to the glory of God. Isn't that so true? We do need to cultivate our minds to the glory of God. Careful attention should be given to the culture of the intellect, that the various organs of the mind may have equal strength by being brought into exercise into its distinctive office. If parents allow their children to follow the bent of their own minds, their own inclination and pleasure to the neglect of duty, their characters will be formed after this pattern, and they will not be competent for any responsible position in life. The desires and inclinations of the young should be restrained, their weak points of character strengthened, and their overstrong tendencies repressed. It's not about delaying education. It's about delaying formal education. Satan has managed to get this sort of flipped around in our minds. Often we push early academics, which are better taught at a later age, while we neglect to develop spirituality, cause to effect reasoning, which are better taught at an early age and can't be learned as well at a later age. Besides, through real life, it's possible to learn so many academic subjects in a practical way. The ideas and subjects we've discussed are definitely important, but by no means are they comprehensive. Be sure to allow creativity to flourish. Children are born with creativity. Help channel it into worthy pursuits. These practical suggestions are meant to just suggest ideas to you. They're not a curriculum, so to speak. They're just ideas. They're trying to help your own creative juices get flowing. Remember that as you put one principle into practice, as you act on what you know, as you move forward with truth that you do know, God will open the door to further knowledge. He will make the way plain to you. Study your children's character. Seek to find ways to reach their hearts. Pray and ask for wisdom from the original designer of your child. You will be blessed. You will be given guidance in your most important work.
I think music has a lot to offer to children. It's a way to express themselves. It's a way that we can praise the Lord. It's something that we can use to minister to others. It also helps with mathematics, helps with all sorts of things. And all of my children enjoy music, so we enjoy singing together, and they enjoy playing their instruments, and it's a nice way we can be together as a family too.
I play cello, guitar, classical guitar, and piano. There's something special when you make music together with other people. First, by yourself, there's already the great power of music to move, to transmit not just an idea but a feeling, and that's multiplied when you're doing it with other people, and that can be to give people peace, give them comfort, and bring them nearer to God.
I grew up in a home where there was not a strong emphasis on music, and I always wanted to play an instrument, but my mom, that just wasn't my parents' focus for. And so I think when I had children, I wanted that for them. It's been a real blessing. I mean, I look at it now, my boys are 16 and 18, and when they get together with friends, they're not just running off doing anything. They want to play music together. So it's just a real blessing to watch them. They get together and they have their instruments, and they'll just spend hours playing music together. And to me, that's a blessing considering what teenagers are doing nowadays. And they'll play at home, together when they don't have anything else to do. If it's a rainy day outside and they just don't have something else they want to do, they'll just say, let's grab our instruments, and they'll play together. And so it's been a real blessing for us.
Music has always been an important part in our family.
Definitely.
We've always sang. My husband played the guitar, and when the children were young, Abby came to me when she was 4 years old and wanted to play the harp, and that's a whole nother story. But we really were not anxious to start with formal music lessons when they were very young. We'd looked at some of the research about childhood learning, and I also talked to several piano teachers and try to get them, ask them what they felt was the best age to start piano lessons. And it was really hard to nail them down, but when I persevered enough, I got the same answer from all of them. It was about 9 years old. They thought that they were the students who made the most rapid progress. They had the best success because they could learn it quickly enough that they felt like excited about what they were learning and felt like they were making progress. So we waited. Abby was 10 when she started piano lessons. She just when she was turning 10. Yeah, she was just turning 10. And then she started playing the harp about a year and a half later.
It was interesting because even though I started about 3 to 4 years older than my other friends who had started, they had already been playing for 3 or 4 years, I passed them within about a year and really enjoyed it because they were so tired of playing the same songs and playing the same level for so long that they kind of just were burning out. And I was charged and ready to go because I'm like, no, I'm just learning so much and doing so much. When it clicks and it's fun, you just fly, and it's so much neater than starting and just dragging through everything. And I would not discourage starting young with music. Do a lot of singing, do a lot of playing instruments around them and letting them do some doodling around or whatever. You can play some rhythm games, do some stuff to get them engaged in music, but don't force their brains to go into these patterns, these things that they have to try to remember and learn. Just make it fun and enjoyable, and then when they get to that point, when their brains click, they already have some of the background and they can fly.
We learned songs together. We learned, I couldn't tell you how many hymns, all the verses memorized, starting from when they were 2 years old. And they could sing some of these songs, all the verses together.
I really believe that playing music, even from infancy on up, it doesn't have to be like all the time constant barrage, but even singing in a group and just simple songs helps their mind to develop so that they have not only an ear later in life, but it develops that love for music. And that to me is one of the biggest gifts that we can give our children, is the love for music, because that's lifelong. And there's been a lot of people out there who are tone deaf. In fact, we just this last weekend went to a music conference together, and it was really neat because the testimony there was this gentleman who was a musician was trying to teach his pastor how to sing and do some music stuff, and his pastor said, I never learned as a child. I never grew up with music at all. And after about 3 lessons, I guess they decided to give up because he just didn't have that from his infancy on up, that music ability, because he wasn't given that gift from his parents.
They found out that when you do sound discrimination exercises, not just the area in the brain related to sound will develop, but your whole brain will develop harmoniously. So what is music? I mean, when a child is learning to play an instrument, and my understanding, this child is constantly doing a sound discrimination exercise. As it's true when you're playing a cello, you have to play the right note. So you put your finger in one position here, play use the bow in a position, and you try to improve that sound quality. You're developing your whole brain.